I'm very
Okay, let's start for the final session of this morning. Hope to find you still alive and well. It looks like. So we start with the final session on the stakeholder perspectives on the parental leave issues. So thank you to Jiřina and Margaret for the invite, that I may be the moderator, taking me out of retirement, but anyway, it's helpful. So, as so often, there is the good and the bad news. The bad news, of course, is that for these members, 7 panelists, that's a mission impossible, stating the obvious, for the time which is left. So the second bad news is no time for the participants for questions. We will be happy not to spoil your lunch for an hour. And finally, of course, to his company, 7 is slightly more than a crowd. That about the bad news. But the good news is that the experience and the expertise of these panelists from different perspectives, as you have noticed in the program about the who's who. And viewing the limitation of time, I will not extend on informing you about the who's who, but of course feel free to do so during the lunch and afterwards. You already have information in your program about from which perspective each panelist will, let's say, deal on 3 questions which were sent to them by Jiřina. And I'll have a look at them. The 3 questions are: what kind of evidence do you find most useful when discussing parental leave policy? Second question, what are the main barriers to improve parental leave policy in your institutional setting or context? And 3, how can future monitoring of parental leave policies capture inequalities between different groups? You may appreciate that for the time left, they have hardly 10-12 minutes each, and I will be rude and rough on time to discuss these issues. And of course, they have not to deal with the 3 questions, but please, from your perspective and expertise, pick out that question or at most 2 questions to briefly deal with. So I will limit myself to just ask all panelists, each after another, to take the floor. Andreas, please, you have.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the nice invitation. Thomas said it's for him a coming home experience, for me too, because the Charles University is our funding member of Population Europe, and we had here a lot of very good events from the very beginning. I would like to go a little bit more cross-cutting approach, which is also the approach of Population Europe, of course. It's a network which is not doing research itself. It really answers to policy requests from the more 40 institutes and 300 experts we have as a base. And I thought about 3 critical periods of transition which you have to go when you think about parenthood. And of course, these critical periods, the critical part of it is that you have to respect a lot of hindering factors and also even resistances. And this is something we have to deal with more closely. So the period where you go into parental leave, during your parental leave, and after your parental leave. So let's look into before parental leave. Of course, as we heard also today, household income plays an important role. Do you have dual earner, single breadwinner model? And particularly what on the cost side, so your cost for housing and maybe transportation, if you live in a very remote place, is more expensive than if you live in the middle of the city. While in the middle of the city, for instance, in Germany, we have 1,800 euros max parental leave scheme, and this may cover your costs for a large family, for renting. But most importantly, I think, are career disadvantages, which you have to take more into regard. And career disadvantages you cannot split between the couples. You have them, each of them. Something which you have to take into regard. We have to think about the kinship network. So is there a family size and composition which allows that you have get some support during your parental leave? That would definitely also influence your decision. Are you a single mother? Do you have a stable partnership, and so on? And the job structure, it makes a difference whether you are working in a small and medium enterprise of, let's say, 5, 6, 7 employees, or you work in a great entrepreneur, great business, international business, with a few thousand employees. If you work in the public service, or if you are self-employed. So we have to take that into regard. And then you come to your period during the parental leave, and I think we have also to consider the workforce which is missing for the employer, because very often this can be a source of resistance and career disadvantages that the employer cannot replace your workforce during your leave. So they might be not so happy. And the other side is, of course, that people who are in parental leave are often missing their job environment, and particularly also for their own self-concept. And then after the parental leave, when the reality hits you, because children remain to be expensive over time, and here some scholars in our network suggested that we should think about supporting families with children more with tax reduction and other opportunities. But particularly career disadvantages is something which we have to do, put more into the foreground, and where we have to think about how can we encourage more retraining measures and entrepreneurs to help people coming back from this experience. What could be practical consequences? We are a policy network. That means we really try to provide stakeholders with evidence and discuss with stakeholders. So we need agents who actually in the entrepreneurial environments can help people when they return from parental leave. Assume the Workers' Council, the gender offices. There are all these structures which we can use. We can use the family centers to have an agent for the young family when they come back to their jobs, and that they are not exposed to job disadvantages. Of course, also they can help changing the mentality, that people really think about, if they progress someone, more on the productive years the person had and not the overall life years. The second thing we have to think is, and it has been discussed also before, are parental leave schemes really sufficient? So what does it mean when you get max 1,800 euros in a city like Munich or Berlin or Hamburg or Prague or the big cities? Is that really helping? And what was raised in Germany very recently is that we need to think about inflation. Very often these schemes are not compensated for inflation. And one reality which we all have to face, we are running into a very serious situation of budget cuts and serious budget limitations. And in Germany, just this week, the Social Democrats started to oppose that cuts are done on the parental leave schemes. So it's really in a condition that this is a matter to be discussed. And so we have to take that also into regard. So we have to discuss, can we make parental leave schemes really depend on the income a person has? Can we exclude or make it more differentiated according to your living conditions? For instance, if you live in a city or if you live in the countryside, could make a difference. We had that in former public service, that this was compensated differently. So we have to think about that, whether this could be a way to go. And we have to think also what it means for the employers and help also the employers to be more flexible. We all know that Europe is now exposed to more competitiveness. We have skill shortages. And the big question is always, how can you compensate workforce during a parental leave? Because this will also inform whether the employer will support you for a longer parental leave or shorter parental leave. For instance, by more flexible reactions, so that we allow more for honorarium contracts, so that people can compensate the workforce they lost over a short limited period of time. We can think about part-time parental leave, which also sometimes comes from the employer side, that they argue and say, I want to work at least a little bit in a side of my life as a father or mother. And we can think about pooling of human resources. That's something which we know in the public sectors with teachers, so that employers know, okay, there's a pool where I can request working time from people who are at place to help me in this kind of, in this period of time. So what we also have to think about, because it's a debate which comes up in the policy sector more and more, is that we also have to think about encouraging private savings, private insurances. We have that actually for many things. For instance, if you fall into you cannot work anymore because of an accident. I don't know the word in English, but in German it's Berufsunfähigkeitsversicherung, so it means that you are not able to perform anymore. And then you go to a special pension scheme, which is very low. And there are insurances which compensate the level which is missing. So that can be something we have to think about. Caretaking insurances we have. So we can think about whether we can encourage people also to do more private savings for that situation, being a parent. And this all comes into a more general debate, which we have to do, which is what kind of expectations are justified? How does a socially just and fair society look like? In one of the sessions before, intergenerational fairness was raised. And I think this is also part of the same game, that we need actually a new social contract where we discuss about how can we balance different interests, different social backgrounds in a fair way and in a sustainable way, because we have not that much money anymore as in previous decades. And what is also very important, and it was also raised in the sessions beforehand, is that we should go away from thinking about parental leave in a way to raise the TFR or the birth rate, but more to come over mother penalty, about parents' penalties, about gender payment gaps, pension gaps, so that we really go into the direction of a more just and fair society. So that's my points. So we should focus a bit more to think about the constraints and resistances on this journey to, during, and out of parental leave. We think should put more research into disadvantages, career disadvantages and others, and workforce compensation. And finally, with regard to data, I think we should, besides surveys and activities, also think about how we can go for data which comes from the companies, from HR departments of the companies. But that, I think, is then part of the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas. Setting that good example, at least in number of minutes you took, but also in terms of content. Sven, Iversen, you have the floor. Bitte.
Yeah, thanks. As the microphone is just standing in front of me, I won't get up and, well, be lazy and just keep seated. Yeah, I haven't like prepared one large kind of speech or input, just some reflections I've had in beforehand and while listening. I thought it was interesting to listen to the first two keynotes where parental leave and families were not even really mentioned. It was about a lot about demography, but that shows how much those things play into each other and how important the framework and the conditions is in this topic we are talking about. Nonetheless, I think parental leave is one of the most important measures we have for the families. And I'm coming from the family policy organizations. I mean, we, of course, take the family perspective first, before taking the employer's perspective, before taking researchers' perspective, or even maybe demography perspectives, because well, I mean, it's pretty obvious. If we have families as members, that's the perspective we are going to take on the short term, but also on the long term. And having parental leave as one of the most known, I think, for the family, from the perspective of the family's measures, it is very relevant to look at it in detail. And that's why I'm very thankful that the cost action exists as such, because it does show the importance, and it is very important to bring it to the forefront even more than it had been before. And ending this right now, I think it's a little bit of a shame. Not only because there's always work left, but as the situation, I think, is even a little bit more different than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And I know the application process started already at least 4, probably 6 years ago. And now, and Andreas mentioned it, the discussion and debates we have about family policy, demography, families, I think shifted a little bit. And we have so many measures that are on stake for the families, which makes it really difficult to argue in favor of the families and to argue in favor of those measures. So having this one very important measure for the families, it is so important to look at it, to look at the effects, to look at the short-term effects, to look at the long-term effects. And at least for I mean, we both are from Germany, which is a coincidence, but after now, in Germany, having the parental leave for how many years now? Almost 20 years. It is a good point from time to time to look on the effects and what did it bring, what goals did we have. Might there be goals that have been evolving in between and maybe having effects that we didn't intend to have, but maybe they're good, maybe they're bad. And so that is very good. I think that you have done all this. We do have this discussion not only in Germany but also in other countries where we can make cuts in spendings and the parental leave. We were really surprised that the parental leave was now, at least in Germany, in the discussion as being the #1 goal to make savings. On the other hand, and that I think makes it interesting to the results we have had in cost action, is one goal was to have a better equality from fathers and mothers, and to strengthen those months that are obliged for the fathers. But one reason to do this is not only to have the equality, gender equality, but also the thought that if fathers don't take up their month and if they fall away, if the fathers don't take it, so we spend less money. So that might be a kind of side effect that might happen, and it's so important to keep that in mind when discussing and when having the debate about those leaves that we have. Another thing I want to mention is something that might be useful to think about in the next years would be the combination to other leaves. I mean, we have parental leave as one of the most important leave, but we are discussing leaves for taking care for the elderly more and more intensely. Completely correct. We have somebody already mentioned this sandwich positions. We have a lot of parents in should they take several leaves at the same time? Do they leave one after each other? So how do they interact with each other? We are having a debate, or let's say some thoughts about having one large leave over the lifetime, where you can take the leave either for children or for elderly or for both, depending on what you need. So those, I think, are very interesting thoughts where the solution is not there, but at least to enforce and to strengthen the debate. From the European perspective, I think there's a good moment to use the policy briefs and to use the results to bring it into the discussion. We have the work-life balance package that is more or less running out in the next years. I think we have next year the very large evaluation about it. So, I mean, what could be more fruitful than the results you are having to put it into there? And then we will have the care deal, which is about to come on, I think, 2027, which, well, maybe it could involve in something like a some reconciliation or work-life balance package 2.0. And I think having those policy briefs, having the results, taking them seriously and bringing them into those discussions to make sure that everything is based on a very solid knowledge and having the appropriate action and policies afterwards really will be something everybody can profit from. So it was a very good timing for the cost action. It's sad it's over, but hopefully everybody just keeps on board working on it and collaborating. And I know from the side of family organizations, I can say we are taking this very seriously and we'll be very, very happy to discuss this further and to bring it forward and to bring it in the further discussion on the national, well, that I can say from as a German, and on the European level, which I can say as representative of COFACE Families Europe. So.
Thank you, Sven. As in the past, talking about Germans, I remain impressed by the German Pünktlichkeit. Thank you for that. So, my pleasure now to ask Michaela Marksova Tominova to take the floor, please.
So thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I'm here. I'm speaking here on behalf of somebody who is not a researcher, but who at least tried to use the research and who tries to really do all the measures to implement them in the real life. So on behalf of a politician, either politician or somebody who did this, who tried to do this within NGO. At the beginning, I would like to say that even though in the Czech Republic, I think the situation improved a lot, it's still a punishment to have a child or children. Like, I'm meaning that the society is punishing you anyway. But never mind. So concerning the data, I think we really have plenty of them, and actually colleagues being responsible for collecting the data, statistics, and doing researches are sitting in this room. And we also have, like, I don't know, I'm not sure if third or fourth huge document, which is called National Report on Families. And I think you can find there almost everything about the families in the Czech Republic. So this should be okay. But what is not okay, then, of course, then politicians would tell you, okay, we would like you to encourage to have children, and we need children, and children are the most beautiful thing in this society, and so on and so on. But then, when it comes to the real measures, actually, we often discovered that it depends who should have the children. And that was a saying of many politicians, actually, but we should support children or working parents to have children, meaning that all those who are from socially disadvantaged environment and so on, you name it, in case of the Czech Republic, mostly Roma communities, then actually we don't want children from them because we think that they have plenty of children, which is not true anymore, but never mind, that they don't take care of them, they put them in the orphanages, and so on and so on. So we, you know, as I said, we want people to have children, but not everybody. So there is a kind of thing in the Czech Republic that we should, we like the tax deductions, because this is something people here believe. That it helps the children, the parents who are working when they have children, but I think it's very limited. And for example, the last government cancelled tax deduction or the possibility for putting your child in kindergarten, which is like against actually the working parents. So they took this advantage from them. And I think it was mentioned here already today, we just need more money put into the system, and we need more services, because also, again, in this country, if you are a single parent, or, God forbid, if you have a child with some disability, it can be a real tragedy. I'm serious, because you don't have the services, you have not enough money. We lack social housing, because I think you maybe from East European countries you can imagine, but like from Germany you can't imagine. Like we don't have social housing, like we don't. And also many municipalities kind of tend not to care about the services for families, and they also say, oh, we need it from the state. And that's also not good. So again, I would like to see the real measures, regardless whose children are they, for several different types of families, and really with the idea that the child is something which we should value regardless of from which environment the child comes from. Oh, and actually the last thing, there was a question about the biggest obstacles. So for me, from my experience, the biggest obstacles were male politicians, 50 plus. I mean, not only, but mostly. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience and expertise from the inside, I would dare to say, as a politician, and so how difficult it is at the end to make family. Next is Raúl Sanchez. You have the floor.
Yes. Hello, good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to represent the voices of large families. I'm representing the European Large Families Confederation. It's an organization that gathers large family associations from 26 European countries, and we are in consultative status with the United Nations. And really, large families are sometimes forget in this kind of discussions, that I'm very happy to be here. And talking about family leave policies, I have 5 ideas to introduce and a final conclusion to have a discussion maybe in the lunch break. The first is because when we discuss about maternity and paternity leave in Europe, we often focus in the length of the leave. But from the perspective of large families, the key question is different. The idea is, are these leave systems truly usable for families with several children? Because a policy is only effective if families are realistically afford to use it. Then for larger families, there are 3 elements that are especially important. The first is an adequate income replacement. The second one is flexibility, and the other one is long-term job security. Then the 5 ideas. The first one, the most effective systems, I think, for families and for larger families are the system that combine flexibility and financial support. For example, in Sweden or Finland, they have really big flexibility. Flexibility matters enormously. The systems of these countries allows a well-paid parental leave, flexible use over several years, shared responsibilities between parents, and part-time combinations. And for large families, this flexibility is essential because family life becomes more complex with each additional child. Families with children do not face the same work-life balance challenges as families with one child. This is very important to take it in account. The second idea is that long leave alone is not enough. Some European countries offer long parental leave periods. For example, in Spain now we have 19 weeks 19 weeks with full salary, 100% salary, and not transferable between father and mother is very good, but only this. After this, we don't have any other measure to support families. Then we have a long period with well paid, but it's not enough. It's not enough. Large families needs another things, you know, and so especially a good compensation during this parental leave. A long leave with insufficient pay is not a real choice for many parents, you know, especially for larger families, because you need to pay basic needs every month for several children, and if the compensation is not enough, then you cannot afford this parental leave. This is why countries, for example, Germany, are interesting because they try to balance income support, parental involvement, and continued attachment to the labor market. The third idea, family policies must be designed beyond the first child, because many families policies in Europe are designed around the experience of the first child, but larger families face cumulative care responsibilities, repeated career interruptions, and much more complex daily logistics. Then the policies should recognize this reality. For example, giving additional leave from the third child onwards, more flexible use of leave, pension protection for caregivers, and for example, family time accounts that parents can use later when children are older. The fourth idea, effective family policy is broader than parental leave. Countries, for example, such as France, remind us that leave alone is not enough. We were talking about the most effective systems combine family benefits, child care availability, tax support, housing policies, family-friendly workplaces. And also I would like to highlight the importance of local policies, because we're talking about national policies, but I think that the policies from municipalities are very important. We established years ago a European network of family-friendly municipalities. You can check the website, familycities.eu. We have now 170 municipalities from 11 countries to share good practices on it, because municipalities are worried about the population of many of these cities, and they want to make these territories attractive for families. And there were one expert, I don't remember the name, Colombian, but in the University of Sorbonne, I think in Paris, talking about this idea of the 15-minute city. You know, if you have all closed, if you have schools closed, childcare closed, you know, your place closed, it's easy to manage a large family. But if you are far and you need to spend a lot of time commuting or these times, then it's very important to work on local policies and good practices from municipalities and also from companies. Then we started this European network of family-friendly municipalities, and now we are starting a new network, the European network of family-friendly companies, because it's very important to convince companies that to take care of the family policies inside the company with the employees is more productive, really, and is more effective than not do it. Parental leave should not be seen as an isolated measure, but as a part of a broader family ecosystem. The fifth idea is to share responsibility matters. If leave policies are not carefully designed, mothers, especially mothers of large families, often carry the greatest professional penalty. Then we should encourage real co-responsibility, father involvement, and flexible working cultures. Gender equality and family policies should not compete with each other. Strong family policies can support both. And on the conclusion, and 2 points only to conclude. The first is, from our point of view, we realize that there is a lack of data on large families in research. We have a lot of data of different types of households, but we feel that in the academia there is no data. Then we would like to encourage here in this place to make more research on large families, to have data to improve policies to support them. The other idea is only to open a discussion about fertility rate, the decline of natality, what model of society we are living. You know, in the last century, we have the problem that women were absent in the social model we are living. Then started the feminism, the revolution of the feminist revolution. And now we have changed society totally. In the middle of the last century, we have this problem taking care of the environment. And then there were another revolution, the ecological revolution. I think that at the beginning of this 21st century, the model of society is mainly based only on individuals, and the family dimension is absent. Then we need another revolution, I think, to introduce this family dimension, and maybe that means to change things, not only small changes, but a big change in the way we are working and we are organizing society. To finish, to have this idea that we have to consider that the budget with destiny from the governments, from the municipalities to support families are considered sometimes as a social policy. Social policy because we consider that having a child is a problem. It's a problem for you, it's a problem, then we need to help you to manage this problem. I think we need to change the mind and that having a child is a social asset, it's a value. Then to consider not a social expenditure, but an investment, like an infrastructure. And the best infrastructure for a country and for our future is the human capital we have to raise these children well, to educate well, and to have and to assure a future. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Viewing the time constraints, and as there has been a working group 4 on terminology in the cost action program, and with the information that Tomáš shared with us this morning, I wouldn't dare to ask you what at present is a large family. Are there still children in a large family? Because it's diminishing. Sorry. Now I would ask and give the floor to Margenda Nesturi, please.
Thank you very much for having this opportunity to be part of this panel. As well as given my data and statistics background, I will focus my talk to the data perspective and share some issues related to Albanian context. So when we discuss for parental leave, I find the most useful evidence, the evidence that connects formal rights with real use and real inequalities. It is not enough to know what the law provides. We also need to understand who actually uses leave, who cannot access it, who cannot afford to use it, and how this relates to unpaid care, women employment, and social protection. For Albania, this means a combination of several sources of evidence. First, the gender statistics are very essential. I will mention here the time use survey and labor market survey, as well as the administrative data that help to show how unpaid care is distributed between women and men and how this affects women's participation in the labor market. Secondly, the administrative data are crucial for measuring actual take-up of maternity, paternity, and parental leave. We need better information on how many mothers and fathers use leave, for how long, with what level of payment, and across which groups of workers. This is particularly important when understanding whether fathers are using existing entitlements and whether some groups are excluded from the schemes. Third, care economy evidence is very important as well. In Albania, UN Women has supported studies on unpaid care work, child care investments, and fiscal space for care policies. Using the UN Women costing tool to estimate care service gaps, investments needs, and economic returns shows that investments in child care and care services can reduce women's unpaid care burden, support their return to work, create new jobs, and generate broader fiscal and social benefits. Comparative studies, comparative evidence as well are useful for benchmarking Albania against EU standards, but as cost papers, policy papers showed us, we should be careful because leave systems and terminology differ across countries. Finally, I would link this evidence to the broader human capital and social convergence agenda. In Albania, UN Women's work on the care economy connects closely with discussion under the UN and Government of Albania Social Convergence Accelerator, because care policies, parental leave, child care, and social protection are directly linked to women's labor market participation, children development, inclusive growth, and long-term human capital. I would like to mention some of the main barriers to improve parental leave in Albania. So in Albania, one of the most or main barrier is the care system still reflects a strongly mother-centered model. Maternity leave is relatively developed, while paternity leave remains very short, and parental leave is unpaid. This creates weak incentives for fathers to take leave and reinforces the idea that childcare is primarily the mother's responsibility. A second barrier is the persistence of traditional gender norms. So even when fathers have legal rights to take leave, they hesitate to use them because of workplace culture, employer expectations, or social attitudes that still associate caregiving mainly with women. A third barrier is linked to the labor market informality in Albania and social insurance coverage. Access to paid leave depends on formal employment and contribution records. This means that workers in informal, unstable, or self-employed situation may have limited access to leave rights in practice, which is particularly important for women and low-income families. Budget and service capacity constraints are also important. Expanding paid parental leave, improving paternity leave, and ensuring access to affordable child care all require fiscal planning and institutional capacities. However, the care economy studies in Albania showed that these policies should not be seen only as costs. Investments in childcare and care services can support mothers to return to work, increase women's labor market participation, create jobs, improve productivity, generate fiscal returns through taxes and social contributions. Finally, the data gaps make it difficult to monitor the progress. Albania needs better information on who is eligible, who uses leave, and whether fathers take up any entitlements. Overall, our challenge is not only adapting the legislation. The larger challenge is moving from a mother-centered care model towards a shared care model, where fathers are encouraged to use leave, women are not expected to carry most of the unpaid care work alone, and families have access to affordable child care services after the leave ends. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being brief, clear, and informing us more specifically about the situation in your country. So, viewing the time, may I ask Jolanta Reingarde to take the floor?
Okay, thank you. And first, I want to say what a big honor is actually to be here and to see some familiar faces, which we met probably in many already years ago, and to be a part of the discussion, because the work and publications of International Leave Network has always been our primary source of reference and have been extensively used by other researchers. And maybe let me first start by saying a few words about the institute I'm from, because that helps us, will help me a little bit to with the presentation of the evidence that we're working on. We are one of the European Union agencies based in Vilnius, so we actually belong to European Union institutional setup, agency which has a primary mandate to work on gender equality, one of the smallest agencies of the European Union. And we work closest with our parent DG, which is DG Justice, and DG Justice actually has a mandate also to work more on early childhood education and care and parental leave policies, while this policy area also belongs to DG Employment. So this is a bit of a context to understand that sometimes this policy coordination between different units is not so straightforward, and it actually creates a certain obstacles as well to proceed. So when I speak about what's the most relevant evidence for us, so it's basically the evidence that Commission wants us to work on, because our agenda is not kind of independent. We're not independently deciding on what we would like to work, but we basically have to reflect on the needs of EU institutions and also member states that are deciding for the work program. So at the moment there are three most important areas that are on our table and we were requested to work on. So first of all, it's in a very big interest of the Commission, but also member states, to understand which elements of parental leave policies contribute to the higher take-up of leave by men. Which design elements are they? Is it related with non-transferability? Is it related with compensation or flexibility or bonus months or eligibility? Which of those elements? And European Commission is even organizing mutual learning seminars, which is actually a very, very popular program that they are having. And the seminar on parental leave actually happened already some time ago, before the Work-Life Balance Directive was adopted, but it's actually on their table. It might come very, very soon, because as you know, the implementation of the directive, countries will have to report on that in 2027, and then the Commission will draft a review report in 2028. So there are many questions coming from member states, and it's perceived that those mutual learning seminars could actually be of a big benefit. Second area of work is actually about policy synergies, how parental leave policies are actually talking to other leave policies in other areas, or the provision of services, whether there are gaps or you know, between the end of one and the beginning of the other, because those gaps, as we know from evidence, are very often filled in by women, and they have an impact on women's labor market participation. If you look at gender equality strategy 2026-2030, there is even one commitment that the Commission will even carry out a big study to see about how the policies covered by Work-Life Balance Directive leave policies are actually linked with other family leaves and to assess that synergy. And the third area, which is very important, is what you also mentioned in several of your policy briefs. It's a broader impact of policy leave policies on other areas, on employment, income, pension gaps, well-being of carers, and also gender norms and perceptions. You might be aware that we are working on Gender Equality Index since 2010. We revised it in last year. Unfortunately, we worked very hard to have an indicator on take-up of leave, but because Gender Equality Index has very strict statistical criteria, and it really has to be very strong on comparability, unfortunately, we couldn't take this indicator into it. We have other ones on intensity of care. But now what we are thinking, because index itself, it has individual level indicators, more performance indicators, we would like to have a contextual indicators for it as well. And to enrich index with contextual indicators on leaves, on finances, and funding allocations, on norms and perceptions, which could help us a little bit to understand the broader context around it. Our work on index over these years was very useful, and we actually, what we are noticing is that policies, of course, were instrumental in closing gender gaps in economic, social rights, and legal protections, anti-discrimination laws. But what we noticed is that these policies reached a certain limit already, and how much they can contribute to closing a gender gap. And every time we start disaggregating data by number of children, by family type, gender gaps open. So basically, what I basically want to say, an equal share of care is a major roadblock, to put it, that we need to address. And that's why inclusive and equal parental leave policies is actually a major opportunity. We see it in this area that could actually help us to address labor market inequalities, how roles are shared within the household, how attitudes and perceptions are impacting it. One more thing, because my time is very limited, you probably noticed that in European Union, it's already some time, it started with the previous term of the Commission, there was a big movement towards this kind of union of equality strategies in a number of areas. And there were several working groups established to work on equality data. One of them is a task force on equality data in Eurostat. They haven't finished yet, but they're actually doing a very great work how to enhance analysis of intersecting inequalities within current surveys that they are working. There is another group within the Commission itself. It's called Equality Subgroup. They actually recently, in some maybe last years, they issued very, very useful recommendations on how to collect ethnicity data, how to collect LGBTI data. So they are looking at different groups. And again, in gender equality strategy, Commission committed to now propose a recommendation on equality data. Irish presidency, which will start from the 1st of July, actually promised to us that this is going to be one of the priority areas, because you might be aware that in March 2026, Ireland was the first country that introduced national equality data strategy. We perceive it as a really good practice. We want to promote it. We know Lithuanians are considering the one as well. So I think that's very, very important that governments actually commit to it and work together with the national statistical institutes how to enforce and strengthen a collection of equality data, which could then be uptaken in public policy. So this is a bit in line of the findings of one of the policy briefs that you addressed, how to look at other social groups and other disadvantaged groups and maybe the last thing, I think it's important for us to share about the barriers. We as European Union institution, this were mentioned already here as well, but we are facing a backlash. We're facing a backlash on different fronts with the use of AI, of course, tools and the digital sphere as well. But we spend a lot of time and energy in trying to address a lot of misinformation and disinformation coming our ways, and unfortunately, strong families, and it's somehow put onto us as some kind of that, gender equality is in a way becomes a scapegoat, and for declining families, declining fertility rates, the fact that a lot of young men are now finding problems to be connected to this world, feeling lonely, and this is the context we are operating. Now, of course, we have also shifting policy priorities, and the question will be how these priorities will affect the whole social agenda and European social model, and changing attitudes of especially of young people. Last year, we produced a policy briefs on gender stereotypes that were very, very revealing, showing very, very diverging views among young people. And I think this is very important to follow and to see, and Eurobarometer helped us here with the data on gender stereotypes of 2024. And yeah, so I want to wrap up here, but just to maybe a few aspects about the context we are operating now.
Thank you for sharing your experience and valuable information about the gender equality perspective. Please. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to give the floor to Professor Nimani.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's actually a great pleasure to be part of the conference and the distinguished panel, and to speak on behalf of United Nations Population Fund from Eastern Europe and Central Asia. I'm specifically based in Kosovo, and I will be speaking mostly focused on Western Balkans. When discussing parental leave in Western Balkans, from Tirana to Sarajevo, Skopje, Belgrade, and Pristina, we are addressing the very core of our region's demographic resilience. For too long, governments in Western Balkans have reacted to declining populations with outdated maternalistic policies aimed strictly at forcing up birth rates. But our regional data shows that women in the Western Balkans are not having fewer children by choice. They are doing so because our societies force an impossible ultimatum: paid work or family. Families and reproductive choices people make are influenced by a complex mix of economic, social, and cultural factors and personal preferences, all interacting with gender inequalities. Female labor force participation in our region remains among the lowest in Europe, dropping to stark 16.5% in Kosovo and hovering around just 50% elsewhere. Why? Because women in Western Balkans shoulder up to 5 hours more per day of unpaid care and domestic work than men. In fact, UNFPA mapping shows that Western Balkans stand out as critical regional hotspot where women spend more than twice as much time as men on completely uncompensated domestic labor and household care. True demographic resilience cannot be achieved by locking women out of the economy or assuming they can do it all. It requires a fundamental redistribution of care. A recent survey on youth aspirations in the region conducted by UNFPA showed that the region overall had a fertility gap. Example, people have less children than what they aspire to, and the fertility gap is clearly larger for men than for women, which is interesting. Overall, women in ICA region report ideally wanting to have an average of 2.9 children in their lifetime and men 3.1. Almost all childless respondents aged 35 to 39 have unmet fertility ideals of wanting to have at least one child in their lifetime. Women rate barriers to parenthood more intensely than men, and with the widest gender gaps regarding health issues, 43.4 versus 30.5, and insufficient involvement of the partner in housework and childcare, 30 to 19.8. Regardless of gender, over 94% of respondents ranked financial security as their top priority, 96%, home ownership and physical well-being. Women are 12% more likely than men to prioritize finishing their education and becoming independent from their parents and home ownership, 80% versus 74%. Men actually place a slightly higher value on finding a life partner, 64%, than women do, 59%. Both sexes value having children almost equally, 63%. This evidence shows us that there is a shift in women's expectations and how they envision themselves engaged in the economies of their countries with bodily and economic autonomy. What moves the needle in Western Balkans? The EU Work-Life Balance Directive as legislative North Star. As our Western Balkan economies advance along their respective EU accession paths, comparative legal gap analyses are our most potent tools. Pointing to the EU directive, which mandates a minimum of 10 days of paid paternity leave and 2 months of non-transferable paid paternity leave for each parent, gives us an objective, aspirational benchmark. It moves the conversation away from emotional or cultural debates and position leave policy as standard requirements for European integration. For example, this is highly visible in Kosovo, where work policies is heavily focused on integrating the EU Work-Life Balance Directive directly into the modernization of the local labor law. National take-up disparity data. Hard administrative data from Social Security and health insurance funds is essential for exposing system failures. For example, North Macedonia has emerged as a regional pioneer through its draft labor relation law, which takes massive leap forward for introducing 3 separate forms of leave: maternity, paternity, and parental leave, explicitly shared between both parents. In Albania, while the labor code was previously amended to offer protection against dismissal during pregnancy and leave, administrative data reveals that actually paternity leave uptake is remarkably low because the 3 days of paid paternity leave are rarely requested or formally tracked. Similarly, in Serbia, while national legislation technically allows for up to a year of total leave to be split between parents, after the initial 3 months, administrative tracking reveals that paternity leave and paternal child care leave uptake remains low due to rigid legal conditionalities and societal stigma. This stark asymmetry proves that Western Balkans' current legal structures actively lock fathers out of caregiving from day one. The microeconomic return of investment of corporate champions. While macroeconomic projections are valuable, private sector data is what sways employers. Through UNFPA Austrian Development Agency partnership, we have mobilized over 50 champion companies across the region, directly impacting more than 30,000 employees. The data emerging from these pilots is undeniable. The experience of Vitaminka North Macedonia to help working mothers reintegrate smoothly into working environment provides additional parental leave that involves 3 months of half-time work with full pay. In Kosovo, Giraffa understands that the well-being of its employees directly impact their productivity. The company aspires for its parental leave policies to cultivate mentality where the responsibility for the family is not placed on women alone, but is shared equally by men and women. To that end, the company has extended its paternity leave to 10 days, up to 3 days required by law. Parental leave for men. The availability of uptake of paternity leave have often been linked with gender equality, as parental leave for fathers helps to balance the caregiving burden between men and women and promotes more equitable workplaces with fewer gender gaps. While the results around paternity leave have been mixed, studies highlight general increase in maternal employment, with a reported 2 to 70% increase in women returning to work after maternity leave when paternity leave is introduced, as well as in the time spent by men on housework and childcare, which has been linked to children's improvement, educational performance without affecting mothers' labor outcomes. Despite these positive outcomes, common challenges persist. Paternity leave uptake is often low among low-income families due to insufficient wage replacement, and cultural norms influence leave distribution and even more egalitarian system. What are the main barriers? The realities on the ground in the Western Balkans reveal 3 deeply entrenched hurdles. The vast majority of our regional economies are dominated by small, medium enterprises. For those companies running on paper-thin margins, this creates a profound financial anxiety. Unintentionally, this structural flow fuels illegal, highly discriminatory hiring practices against young women. If we want to protect women from being screened out of job interviews, we must advocate for total transition to state-managed collective social security financing schemes. The Western Balkans still is restless with traditional norms that dictate childcare is solely women's moral duty, while men are restricted to the role of financial provider. The gender norms, however, are not only determining women's relationship to unpaid care work, it is also limiting men's role within families and only breadwinners, and creating barriers to their true engagement with the care of their families. In UNFPA-led focus groups across the region, fathers frequently report that their peers and even their managers view a man taking extended parental leave as culturally bizarre or professionally damaging. In fact, in some sub-regions, institutional medical protocols still restrict fathers from being present during childbirth, setting a tone of paternal exclusion from the absolute first birth. Passing the law is not it is only the half of the battle. In Western Balkans, advanced legislative text has been formulated. The primary hurdle remains the slow pace of official adoption, interministerial coordination regarding fiscal impact, and weak inspection mechanism. Until these laws are fully enacted and enforced, work-life reconciliation is left entirely to the ad hoc discretion of individuals, supervisors, and the result is highly unequal landscape where public sector workers are elite multinational employees, enjoy flexibility, while the broader workforce is left behind. If our data collection system is only evaluate the ideal employment, meaning that someone with full-time indefinite contract in formal urban corporate office, we are completely blind ourselves to the structural reality the Western Balkans labor market has. Monitoring must be explicitly cross-reference, leave take-up with household income. If a country introduces paternity or parental leave benefit but pays at a low flat rate or small fraction of the wage, low income households simply cannot afford to utilize it. This cannot afford to lose the father's primary income. For family-friendly companies and companies that have particular focus on promoting gender equality among their employees, the short-term friction caused by parental leave policies can be easily addressed with the potential to improve companies' performance. By leveraging EU-aligned data, alleviating private sector anxiety through collective financing, and aggressively tracking inequality through an intersectional lens, the UNFPA and ADA Expanding Choices program is actively rewriting our region's demographic narrative. In Albania, North Macedonia, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Kosovo, we are proving that when we empower fathers to care, we support women to lead, and when we support women to lead, we build the foundation for an equal, stable, and truly resilient Western Balkans. Thank you.
Thank you, Vizare. I was honestly afraid that as the final panelist, you would have only a few minutes left. But I think you took most of the minutes. Thank you anyway. But shame on me to having pushed the panelists. Sincere respect for the possibility of squeezing this in few minutes. Incredibile. We made it before time. So you may rush out to have your lunch, or we can still ask the panelists if they would like to comment, to ask something which they certainly hadn't prepared for or were not daring to bring in. So we have minutes left. There may also be a half a minute for the audience for a question. You have it, Anne-Sophie.
Thank you. And thanks for all these very different perspectives and very important things that you have brought up on different things that we still have to deal with, and new things coming up in systems that we might thought be working, like in the German system, reductions coming in and so on, and then the emerging, not the emerging, but the very immediate and urgent questions from all over Europe. But I was thinking of another thing with sustainability that I think we all know is important, but we're not used to talking about it in this setting, and that's of course the ecological emergent question. That's part of the sustainability that we all know. And I wonder if within, from your perspective and your organizations, have thought about it, how to deal with it in some way, or whether you think it's to be incorporated, or whether we have so much to do with with social and economic questions and gender equality that we should actually leave it to the ecologist for now. What's your take on this? Should we try to bring it in or not, is my question.
Thank you, Anne-Sophie. As usual, a simple question. So, simple answers, please.
Yeah, it's a very, very important question. We had this question already a couple of years ago, which was put to us from the German Family Ministry. So to understand how can families actually contribute to ecological policies and to climate change policies? So which families are able to fund e-mobility, which are able to make sure that their houses are not wasting too much energy, and so on and so on. And particularly also in view of the growing disparities over the country. And so this question is addressed, and of course we called it Green Family, by the way, the paper. And I think we have really to seriously think about it, because we put also there more and more burdens on families, and depending on the kids they have to care for, on the question whether they are in a sandwich situation, so they may need an automobility in order to reach to schools, to reach to the parents. We have then to reduce perhaps the requests to families or give them more financial support that they can meet these things. Because if you live in the countryside and you have a large family and the public transportation is bad, then it creates a burden.
As brief as possible, because there are other questions.
Yes, one thing to say, when the Prince Henry announced that only have 2 children, and say, okay, we don't want to have more because we are worried about the earth and this kind of thing. We sent a letter to him to say that this is okay, but maybe to take in account that the large family's lifestyle is very taking account this question, because large families, we are in a world with an increasing number of single households, and people living alone with a freezer, with a car, with a TV, with a house, with energy. And in the large families, we recycle, we have an economy of scale, we have a circular economy, we save a lot of things. Then this lifestyle, I don't want to say that large families is the best, everyone can, but sometimes this conception about not having children because we are worried about the future, I think it's not, I think the problem now we have is this problem of single people, increasing number of single people living alone with this problem of loneliness. And I think that this idea that to recycle, to save things, to take benefit of to use the clothes of the sister, of the brother, the parents, this kind of lifestyles we need, and less consumption. Yes,
thank you, Raul.
I have. Well, the question is basically in the interaction of data gaps and policies. What is the place for having analyzed collective agreements across Europe? What is the place for this important issue, in my opinion? What is the place for collective agreements on parental leaves and family-friendly policies, as well as bargaining at the level of the firm? And since you were mentioning about the intention of having a new network of family-friendly companies, I would also think about something that put together workers and organization.
Yes, well, we are trying to repeat. We have this European network of family-friendly municipalities to put together policymakers at the local level with experts and with civil society. And also the idea is to create an integrate network with all the stakeholders work together to build these attractive territories. Then in this European network of family-friendly companies, we want to link and to that work together, municipalities, companies, educational centers, universities, all people with the same objective. This is the idea we have with this network, but I don't know if some of you want to add something.
Thank you, Raul. So maybe we can close here. Jiřina, it's really up to your email you sent to the panelists. No this, squeeze it within 10 minutes, whatever. They did. They performed very well. It reminds me, Peter, of the old days with the so-called child care network of the European Commission. We had an expert seminar in Ravenna de Mare, and you were from Northern Europe and from Southern Europe. And at the end of day one, there was really a clash because the Northern Europeans complained about the philosophical of the Spanish and the Italian colleagues, parole, parole, parole. And the Southern European colleagues complained about the Northern, about data, statistics, graphs. Anyway, it didn't happen here. We have a new setting in Europe. Thank you for your attention. Enjoy your lunch.